This one. Ah, okay. This is. Are you able to see the slides? Hopefully, yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's continue. That's the syllabus. As I told yesterday, today I wanted to complete the syllabus, but it's okay. We'll revisit the basics one more time. And yesterday we were discussing on what is it called? This idea of coordination complexes. Why the coordination complexes are unique, and what is the nature of bonding in terms of this coordination complex and so on. This is very fundamental distinguishing feature between the covalent bond, ionic bond, and so on. So we have generic what is it, from childhood onwards, during from school days onwards, we were told there are four major classification of bonding. One is the simple covalent bonding, wherein the electrons share between two participating atoms in a common orbital. That's what we start our basic understanding of bonding. And slowly we developed the idea that there is something called common orbital, and we introduced, or we were told, we can think of bonding in terms of common orbital, and that is equivalent to this molecular orbital theory. So molecular orbital theory says about the common orbital where the electrons tend to occupy or spend time in both the atoms, and depending upon the electronegativity, the time electrons spend in particular atom varies. That's the molecular orbital theory in simplified form. Then we had the metallic bonding, where of similar elements, when the similar elements have a very high boiling points. High boiling points in the sense they cannot convert itself into independent atom at room temperature. It's very difficult. So in that case, these atoms combine, coils, and form a lumps of similar elements. The similar elements then form a bed of, or a sea of electrons, in which these uh, elements are buried. Deep inside, the elements are probably in ionic state, positively charged. So you can visualize metallic bond in terms of somebody is okay. The metallic bond, what you can visualize is, you can think of the charge that is being developed in a core of the metallic cluster, and then slowly the charge emerges outside to the periphery, where you have more electrons freely available at the surface. And deep inside, if the electrons are freely available in the surface, counterintuitively, even though we don't have a direct proof whether protons are exists, or the atoms are in ionic form, deep down inside we don't have a direct proof, but counterintuitively we can assume that if electrons are labile on the surface, by default the other end, where the counter ion, the positively charged atom, should be existing. So this is counterintuitive, but there is no direct proof. Anyhow, we are not focusing more on metallic bond. We are focusing more on these coordination complexes. The coordination complex, what is more interesting is the, sometime my this one is hanging. Is it working? My computer is hanging now. Hello?
But we can still hear you, sir.
Still here. I'm not able to move my this mouse or whatever. You are also able to see the slides. I am not able to change the slides. That's another. One second, I will do something. What to do? Okay, leave it. One problem means other problem is there. Trackpad is not working. I see. The trackpad is not working, so that's why it is not able to. Okay. Fine. In coordination compound, what happens is we have the donation of pair of electrons to the vacant d orbital, and we call it as a dative bond or the complete donation of a pair of electrons to the central metal atom. Usually you need to have a vacant space for the two electrons to be accommodated inside. The next question, uh, right type of this bonding or met and take. So depending upon the number of pair of electron, you call it as a 4 coordination number or 6 coordination number. Usually the 4 and 6 are very common. 5 is very, very rare. And usually the 5, 3, something in between arises where you have metal bonds, which is also present in coordination compounds. Somewhere you have back donation also in coordination compound. From metal, the available electrons, pair of electron available in any of the d orbital is sent back to the ligand. So these kind of explanations are based on experimental observations. So there is no hard and fast rule in any of the theory, whatever you learn in any of the subject. Okay. So whatever theory you try to comprehend is based on the experimental evidences we have. Currently, the experimental evidences has certain limitation. With that limitation, what we can understand, that is what is going on in the current science generally. So now to understand more deep on coordination compounds, we have given the syllabus has only select few elements: chromium, iron, cobalt, nickel, and copper. Why these 5 elements are chosen is you can find examples of inner and outer orbital complexes. Before going into the details of inner and outer orbital complexes, I will try to review some of the very fundamental ideas of coordination complexes. We had a very brief idea on Werner's work. That's what I discussed in the last class also. What Werner did is he did 2 experiments. Both of them are mutually exclusive experiment. When I explain the experiment, you will understand. One experiment is you take the complex of cobalt, hexamine cobalt chloride. You take that complex and gravimetrically estimate how much of silver chloride can be precipitated per known quantity of that complex. So that is one experiment. So gravimetrically you estimate the amount of, or when you try to convert into moles, per mole of this cobalt complex, which is shown as A, he could precipitate 3 moles of silver chloride. On the B complex, he could only precipitate 2 moles of silver complex. In both, the oxidation is 3. Okay. The color of the one is purple, the color of the two is red color. He has found out from this observation, only this experiment, the number of moles of silver chloride that is precipitated by treating complex A and complex B. Of course, there was complex C also, which had 3 chlorine replaced for 2 ammonia. In that case, what happened is you had 1 mole of silver chloride precipitated out. Okay. Whatever it is, that is one experiment, precipitation experiment. Just 1 second. ஹலோ கிளாஸ் ஆரம்பிச்சிட்டேன் நான் ஒரு அரை மணி நேரத்தில் ஃபோன் பண்ணுறேன். சரி. The second experiment he did is he did the conductometric experiment. He just measured the conductivity of the complex. You dissolve the conductivity of this A complex and dissolve the B complex separately. Measure which conducts better. Since three halides are freely dissociated, the conductivity of the left hand side A complex is significantly higher than the conductivity of B complex. And based on these two independent experiments, so very simple experiment, just to measure two. So why this behavior is observed in these complexes? That's what he tried to extrapolate. Based on that, he came to a conclusion: both the metal atom, the central metal atom, are same oxidation state, but the observation is like this. So this observation can be understood by introducing the hypothesis of primary valence and secondary valence, which can be ionized. He called it as a primary valence, which cannot be ionized. He called it as a secondary valence. In this case, the secondary valence is later on understood as the coordination number of the particular compound. This is what the very basic foundation of this coordination chemistry. There are many drawbacks with the Werner's work, which we saw in the last class also. But now later on, once the chemistry based on the bonding of coordination complexes evolved, more and more new theories have come. One of the earliest theories that explain the coordination number is based on the 18 electron rule or effective atomic number. So you try to fill the outermost the orbital, the valence shell, complete it. That's the idea. So now the how do I complete? By either rearranging the d orbital electrons, or I allow the incoming ligands in such a way that the total number of electrons that resembles the complete shell of inert gas elements, the nearby inert gas element. For example, here, chromium, hexacarbonyl chromium, which is uh, this carbonyl is a neutral ligand. So six pair of electron is donated from the carbonyl, and during this, the chromium forms neutral complexes with this carbonyl. This hexacarbonyl chromium, when you add the 24 number electron of the chromium plus 12 electron donated from the carbonyl, you have 36 electron, which is equivalent to the inert gas configuration of krypton. Similarly, the next level, if you go down for palladium, the hexamine palladium complex 46, then you have to add 12 minus 4, 58 minus 4, 54. That becomes the xenon complex. That minus 4 is for the 4 positive charge present in the palladium ion. Similarly, platinum. These are all the earliest explanation given for the complete shell, completion of the shell by these ligands. The ligands are providing the electrons and completing the shell. This is what they explain. But there are complexes which is given in the second segment of this table, which does not obey with the effective atomic number, like hexacyano ion 3. The number of electrons in ion is 26. 3 plus becomes 23, and then you have 12 electrons added, then you add, it becomes 35 electron, which is 1 electron less than krypton. So how do you explain for the formation of these electrons? So the coordination theory slowly evolved from Werner's hypothesis of primary valence and secondary valence. Werner could not explain why there is a 6 number of ligands present in cobalt complex. Why can't you have 4 number of ligands? I can accept your primary valence and secondary valence story, but why the number of ligands present is only 6? Why can't it become 3 or 4? Why the primary valence is fixed in the case of these kind of ligands? That's a question which is slowly explained some chemist by having this effective atomic number. It is not going. Okay. So now the effective atomic number, why it is not obeying is probably because of the additional stability given by the incoming ligands and the ability of the ligand to protect the shell, the complex shell, sphere, and so on. So which we will understand by carefully seeing how the d orbitals behave in the presence of ligand. To understand how the d orbital behave in the presence of a ligand, we should first know how the d orbitals are possibly what is it called, having its electrons arranged in the three-dimensional space. So in the absence of any ligand, a completely filled d orbital, you forget about that there is no ligand, or in otherwise the field created by the ligand is completely absent. So now all the d orbitals which we know, which is having a double doubled shape as shown in this slide, if you overlay means you take the nodal point of the individual orbitals like dxy, dxz, dyz, dx square, y square, dz square, this nodal point, and overlay on other nodes, you generate something called a near spherical orbital of the d orbital. It's not going to be perfectly spherical, but it's going to be a nearly spherical. Now just you have a nearly spherical orbital in the absence of any ligand. You allow the ligand to enter, approach this d orbital. The ligand should approach in such way that the distance between two ligands should be as much far away as possible, because ligand steric repulsion, ligand electronic repulsion is one of the influencing parameter. Usually three dimensionally you have to give maximum space between the individual ligands. So just visualize that you are giving maximum space for individual ligands. If that is the case, you have to accommodate these ligands in a octahedral geometry for a 6 coordination, and you can either have a tetrahedral or sometimes square planar geometry. Suppose if you have a octahedral approach, what is an octahedral approach? 6 ligands are coming, and the 6 ligands, if you want to keep them far away, the best way is to allow this ligand to approach through the axis, which means that actually there is no axis drawn onto the atom. So don't think that there is an axis drawn onto the atom. There is no axis drawn onto the atom, but to make sure that the ligands are kept far away from each other, they come through, spatially orient them in such way that if you draw an axis perpendicular to each other, it exactly fits, the ligand's position exactly fits to the axis. So now if the ligands are coming through the axis, so it is not actually coming through the axis, it comes randomly, but after the ligands come, you draw the axis through the ligand. Hello, I think somebody's microphone is on. Okay. Through the ligands, you will have the maximum repulsion that is happening through the axis. So you can see that there are two orbitals that are having orbitals on the axis, the dx square, y square, and dz square. So these two orbitals will feel maximum repulsion from the ligand, which means the energy content of the orbitals are going to be increased. One second, hold on. So the energy content of the ligands are going to be more of the Eg orbital, which are having orbitals on the axis in the presence of ligand, and in the other three, which is having the lobes placed in between the axis, which are not on the path of ligand, which we call it as in between the axis, will have less repulsion between the ligand and the orbital, and they are stabilized better than the whatever it is. And then what happens? Suppose if I given, why suddenly this comes? I want to show something else. Okay. Okay. So you have this splitting into two groups. One is Eg orbitals, other one is a T2G orbital. So for time being, you keep in mind this basic idea that the approach of ligand is going to create two non-degenerate orbitals, two sets. One set is known as Eg orbital, other set is known as T2G orbital, that is known as a doubly degenerate and triply degenerate orbital. Why triply degenerate? Three orbitals which has the lobes in between the approach axis of ligands. So I am not saying that through the axis of x, y, z, Instead, I want you to clearly understand that the approach axis of ligand is known as the x-axis, y-axis, and z-axis. If the orbitals are in between the approach axis, it will be having less repulsion between ligand orbitals and this set of orbital, and they have more stability compared to other one. When you do the filling of electron in such case, the electrons will first tend to fill at the lower energy system. This idea you keep in mind, which will be useful at the later stage. We will move on to this uh, going back and forth. Okay. Move on to the valence bond theory with one example. I will try to give this inner shell and outer shell idea. Okay. So take the cobalt 3 plus as an example. So the electronic configuration of cobalt 3 plus is shown here. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 filled, and the sixth electron is held. So you have 6 electrons in the d orbital and it is filled. Why it is filled like this in d orbital? Because the energy of the 4s orbital is slightly higher. So this is how the electronic orbitals are filled at the simple cobalt 3 plus. When you have the ligand that is approaching, if the ligand is very weak, okay, if the ligand is not so strong, it is going to be a very weak ligand. The weak ligand will come and stay slightly far away from the d orbital. 3d orbital is not much disturbed. But since there is a possibility of vacant orbital, the pair of electrons from the ligand is donated or placed in the 4s, 4p, and 4d. And this hybridization is sp3d2 hybridization. You see, where is this? This is S, this is P3, and this is D2. So sp3d2 hybridization is known as outer orbital complex or high spin complexes. Okay, and why it is known as high spin complex? If you see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 electrons are unpaired. The energy difference between the 3d orbitals are not disturbed. The degeneracy is not lifted. And since the degeneracy is not lifted, the electrons are not going to rearrange. So what you can visualize is, you have a central metal here. The ligands are coming from infinity very close to the central metal. But the ligands are not coming so closely to the central metal. It is staying a little bit far away. And the ligand's electron density is not strong. The electron density is not so strong that it can influence the 3D orbitals. The electrons that are present in 3D orbitals are not disturbed to a larger extent. They remain as a degenerate set, buried, deep buried. And the incoming ligands are putting their electron density, they are filling their electron density in the outer sphere of the complexes. So they are known as outer sphere complexes. And since they are not disturbing the inner orbitals, the unpaired electrons of inner orbital are going to remain as unpaired electron forever. And since the unpaired electron contributes for the spin, they are known as high spin complexes. See, the configuration here is, the hybridization here is sp3d2, outer orbital complexes. It gives an octahedral geometry and it is a high spin complexes. Again, I have to go here. Okay. Similarly, you have inner shell complexes. If you see inner shell complexes, the ligands are going to be slightly stronger. They can come even more closer to the whatever central metal atom. And now the question, if I ask you the question, you'll immediately answer in your mind itself. The answer tuck like that pops up. What could be the size of the ligand that is coming to form an outer sphere complex? If the ligands can stay far away from the central metal atom, the size can be bigger. So the size of the ligand for outer sphere complexes are slightly larger. It can have a slightly larger size. The polarizability is going to be less, and so on. For inner sphere complexes, if the ligands are very big, they cannot come closer because the ligand steric repulsion will prevent them from entering deep. close to the central metal orbitals. So it cannot come closer. The ligand should be very small, tiny ligands, and then the ligand should have a high ability to polarize. Okay, influence. If they can influence to a larger extent, they create virtually two sets of d orbital. As I said, the energy of the T2G, these three, will be slightly lower. The already existing electrons will go and take that positions here. These two are filled, completely filled, and this will have a slightly higher energy which will be filled from the ligand. So the energy of the D12, 4s, 4p, 3, 4p, all are going to be degenerate because all are from the similar ligands, unless otherwise you have a unsymmetrical ligand approach. If the ligands are same, all 6 ligands are same, then in the D2sp3 you will have a hybridized system and you will have a perfectly symmetric octahedral shape, and these complexes will have a low spin or all the electrons are paired and buried inside, and these are, since they are having a deep penetration, these are all known as inner orbital complexes. Okay. And you see the hybridization for a tetrahedral geometry and square planar geometry. In the case of tetrahedral geometry, the spin is going to be high. So tetrahedral means what? The ligands are kept far away from each other in three-dimensional space. Square planar, you should have, besides the ligands, you should have at least one electron pair, which is, or two electron pair, which is occupying the top and bottom. You visualize the octahedral geometry, visualize an octahedral geometry, but the two lone pairs of the two electron pair in the octahedral geometries are removed and replaced with the electrons of the same metal atom. So same metal atom is going to have its own electron placed, and since the square planar geometry is going to allow the ligands to come close by, so they will have dsp2 hybridization and resulting in square planar shape. Actually, first square planar geometry is attained that lead to dsp2 hybridization, whereas tetrahedral geometry is because of sp3 hybridization. This is based on the valence bond theory. You go back and read the text. Let's revisit the same concept in a different perspective Monday or in the next class. Let's move on to the next theory, which is known as crystal field theory, which even more clearly explains the reason for what is it called, the splitting of further orbitals, and the ligands are treated in crystal field theory as a point charges, and there is no interaction between metal orbitals and ligand orbitals. That's what the CFT says. The d orbitals on the metal all have the same energy in the absence of ligand, which we explain now. When the ligand comes, you see the EG orbital are having what they call higher energy compared to the T2G orbital. Okay, so this is what the fundamental idea of all the coordination chemistry, which you will thoroughly study in the subsequent semesters. Okay, the 5 degenerate orbitals here is in the presence of the 6 ligands octahedral field, it became into 2 sets of groups. And what you also should know is what could be the splitting energy of these things. The EG orbitals are stabilized 0.6 times. Suppose if there are 10 electrons, so if I say that the 10 electrons resulting in 5 sets, each electron contributing one arbitrary unit of energy, delta naught. If one can contribute for delta naught, 10 electron will contribute for 10 delta naught, and the energy stabilization by EG is going to be because of the loss of T2G. So how much T2G lost? 0.6 T2G lost. So you have 0.6 of delta naught stabilization or destabilization for EG, and minus zero point 0.4 stabilization. The energy comes down means stabilization. So the T2G is zero point 0.4 times stabilized and EG is zero point 0.6 times destabilized because of the opposite one. The other one is destabilizing, other one is stabilizing. So that's the reason this idea also you keep in mind, okay, which will be helpful at the later stage when you read more deeply on the coordination complexes. And if you have the splitting pattern and you have two sets of energy, two sets of orbitals, you can promote from one level to other level. Here, if you see that you have the what is it called T2G, and you can promote to this level. From T2G, it can go to EG, and this transfer is known as electronic excitation. And since that is happening within the d orbital, is known as d transition. And d transition has a high epsilon value, and the high epsilon value means it's very intense in color. Okay, and I will show you some of the values, then you will appreciate the what is it called intensity. Before going to that intensity or epsilon value, you should understand that there is something called a spectrochemical series. The spectrochemical series is, in the presence of these ligands, the splitting is much effective. In the presence of these ligand, the splitting is not much effective. If the splitting is much effective, the energy gap between the two sets of degenerate orbital, the T2G and EG, is going to be very large. In that case, you will get, if the splitting is very effective, you will get larger separation in energy. Larger separation means lower wavelength or higher frequency. Lower wavelength is going to be blue or green in color. Higher wavelength is going to be red in color. If the ligand is weak, you will have almost a red colored compound. If the ligand is very strong, you will have a very high splitting, and you will most often get compounds are closely resembling green or blue color. Okay, you remember this spectrochemical series. I am not going to explain why iodine is weak and carbonyl, the CO is very strong. All this explanation will be given when you come to your higher level of studies. But for time being, you can just understand this concept. There is a classification of ligands based on their ability to split the d orbital into two sets. How much effectively they are splitting, that tells their field strength, and you call it as a weak field ligand and strong field ligand. Okay, so with this, how do I go? One second, one second. Okay, done. I am not able to see the screen. Let's see the screen. Okay, I came back to the screen. I think I revisited the concepts. I am not introducing new concept today. The new concept I want to introduce only after you read some of the textbook and understand the concept. Then you can have the idea. Then we will discuss in the next class. Okay. If any doubts or question, as usual, we can have it. There is one question from Janani. Is there any possibility of forming D2sp hybrid orbital for tetrahedral complex? Because the possibility of further pairing of extra unpaired three orbital. Yes, yes, I understood your question. Why there is a formation of DSP2 hybrid instead of D2sp? The same question, like what Janani asked. So let's go back to my presentation. Whether I can open or not, I don't know. Let me try this. is here. I'll open the percentage. It got closed. 1 second. Just 1 second. I'll explain this. Okay. In this tetrahedral geometry, you are saying that why can't we ask the unpaired electron? I think you are not able to see the screen. Wait 1 second. How to go here? Share screen, not screen. Share. Share. Why this is not working? Some timing problem. No. Something is not working. Hello? Sound is.
Yes, sir.
Oh, some. Okay. You are able to see this? Yes. This is the question asked. Both of them asked the same question. Why can't these two electrons, this first two are paired, why can't these two can pair and form D2sp? That's the question. Instead of DsP2 hybridization, why can't they form D2sp? Okay. Now there is something called pairing energy for electrons. You cannot simply ask the electron to get paired. There is something called a pairing energy for electron. And there is also an energy associated with the orbitals. As I told, the 3D orbitals are going to be split into two what is it called, two sets, T2G and EG. And because of they are split into two sets, T2G and EG sets, the EG orbitals are degenerate. So now in the case of the square planar or the tetrahedral geometry, the EG is the one which is going to come down. Okay, whatever you are seeing on the three left hand side, right hand side of the three orbital, that is the T2G orbitals. It is on the top. When you read the textbook JD Lee, you can see this explanation. If not there, you can refer to Inorganic by Atkins. In both the text, it is there. In either of them, I don't know which one is there. The 3D orbitals of T2G is having higher energy in the tetrahedral and square planar complexes, which will be further split depending upon the nature of ligand. Now you don't go so deep into the subject. So now you have a EG and 2G. This T2G are degenerate already. In that case, if you are going to force the electron to take a pair, it is going to cost. Why should I take a pair when the energy of the orbitals are equal? So when the energy, the orbitals are having space, when there is a space equal in energy, the electron always prefer to be as a single electron. Why? Because the pairing energy is, you have to spend some energy for the electron to get paired. That is known as pairing energy. And because of that pairing energy, the electron remains a single energy, and there is no possibility of forming this D2sp hybridization. That's the reason. Is EAN always expected to be equal to atomic number of noble gas? Yes. No, this EAN idea was a very old idea. I actually wanted to give you a historical perspective of the coordination chemistry that came along over a period of 200 years of chemistry. The initial work was only to say that there is a primary valency and secondary valency. The very earlier papers, the scientific research papers, are focused on identifying the complexes with primary and secondary valence. Later on, why there are six number of ligand, why there are four number of ligand, like some scientists started asking questions, or some researcher wanted to know, can I make inorganic complexes with two ligands, three ligands, one ligand? Is it possible? So these kind of critical questions were asked. The answer for that question is, it is possible to make coordination compound with one ligand given the condition it obeys the effective atomic number. So that was the initial experiment, because the people, when they attempted to make such complexes, they could not make complexes. For example, usually what the scientist think is, or the chemist think is, you take x moles of metal and add 2x moles of ligand. You should form a 1:2 complex. You have x moles of metal, you add 3x, you expect to form 3x moles, but it won't work. What happens is, one metal will consume 6 times of ligand, and some metals will be deprived of ligand. That's what will happen. Okay, it will never form. It is almost like our society, where you think that if the wealth is 100, will the wealth will be evenly distributed. If the opportunity is given equally, whether the opportunity will be taken by all the people equally? No. Even if you ask all the students to come and log in, all the students will not log in for the class. Only those who are interested to learn the subject will log in. So when something is given free of cost, when something is available equally, there is no equal choice always taken. Only the choice is taken in such way that more stability will come. It is like first come first serve for the metal ion. Which metal ion forms the complex will form a tetrahedral or octahedral, depending upon the nature of ligand, the number of electrons available in the d orbitals of respective. That is the reason why whenever a complex forms, you try to manipulate or try to prepare a complex with a different coordination number, which is not at all happening. Why it is not happening? Because the complex tend to attain the effective atomic number. This is the earliest explanation given for lot of complexes that were attempted or prepared during the very old time. But recent explanation, where you have very complex complexes, very complex complexes is, you have bridge bonds. You have bridge bond between metal and ligand, metal ligand metal type of bridge bond, direct metal metal bridge bonds. You have the new concept called back donation, where the idea of banana bonds comes. So these kind of new explanation comes based on the observations. So the EAN rule is one of the earliest attempt to explain the inability of the scientist to make complexes with various number of ligands surrounding them. Now once they're able to make, they question the EAN rule, which is explained based on something else, the new concept of crystal field theory and so on. Anything else? Since there were not, yes, please go ahead.
You were about to show some epsilon values.
That I could not show. In the next class I will show you. The table is not showing. Actually, it is an edited table. It is not coming up. So I am doing in two laptops. First I tried in laptop number 1, and this is laptop number 2. There is a problem with WebEx. Why our university bought WebEx? Still I don't have an answer. Any of this.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. I will show you in the next class. Okay. I'll
Sure,
try
sir.
to convert it into image and show it in the next class.
Yes, sir.
Okay. There are no questions. Let's close this class. We will meet in the next class. Okay. Meantime, we have to, you please get ready for examination or a test or something like that. Anytime you can have the test. Maybe Monday, or maybe next Thursday or next Friday. Don't tell that I have not informed you in advance. You always be ready. Nobody tells that enemy is going to come and kill you. Be prepared for war all the time. Okay. It's not, the test is not like war. I just want you to enjoy learning. Keep learning. Don't postpone, procrastinate. Don't procrastinate. Finish whatever you are supposed to learn on the same day itself. Enjoy learning. Like you asked several nice questions, same questions you keep asking and try to find answer by yourself. You will see how interestingly the people did the research to uh, prove some naturally occurring complexes have this kind of behavior, this kind of behavior, and so on. You should read that kind of books. rather than simply reading the concepts, how they came to this particular idea, why this concept is accepted, so on like that. Okay. Anyway, we'll see in the next class. Now let's close the session. Take care, be safe. Bye. See you Monday.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you, sir.